conversation. I think we'll just keep talking for about half an hour, but then we'd really invite you guys to ask questions. My name is Anita Zilina. I work at the Newmark J School at CUNY and build and run executive programs there. And with me on this stage, and I'm very honored that I'll lead this fireside chat with Maria Ressa, who is the CEO of Rappler, the fourth largest Filipino news site. And we're going to talk about a wide range of topics. We discussed that before, and when we had dinner last night, from press freedom to modern business models, so pretty much everything that hopefully this crowd is interested in. Welcome, Maria.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to start with a short movie, actually, that is going to give you a bit of an overview over Rappler and Maria's work. So let's do that before we chat.
If I can make it there, I'll make it. Anywhere, it's up to you. New York, New York.
The Securities and Exchange Commission has ordered the closure.
The Securities and Exchange Commission orders the revocation of
ang Certificate of Incorporation ng online news site na Rappler.
We felt that going to get PDRs, which don't give any ownership or any control, would give us the ultimate independence.
Rappler, try to pierce the identity, and you will end up American ownership. CIA funded, gano'n na mga NED, Rappler, yung mga gano'n.
In 2016, Rodrigo Duterte was elected, promising to wipe out drug-related crime. It will be bloody, he warned. The funeral parlors will be packed. He has kept his promise. Thousands have been killed, many among them the poorest in society.
Rappler, your articles are ripe with innuendos and pregnant with falsity. We do not intervene in the affairs of the armed forces. Since you are a fake news outlet, then I am not surprised that your articles are also fake.
Maria and her team are a shining example of principled resistance to the erosion of democratic norms. They have also shown how a newsroom led and staffed by women can stand up to a misogynist president.
You know, this is the time to fight. This is the time to tell people, here's the line. And you have to make sure that our government doesn't cross it, because when it does, we're no longer a democracy.
We at Rappler decided that when we look back at this moment a decade from now, we will have done everything we could. We did not duck. We did not hide. We are Rappler, and we will hold the line.
Every time I see that movie, I still get goosebumps, and it must be the same for a lot of us in the audience. The last time that I saw you in California at a Google event, you actually left that event and to board the plane back to the Philippines, and you knew you would get arrested the moment you leave this plane. Can you give us a little bit of kind of, you know, an impression? Where are you now? Where is Rappler now? What is the situation?
You know, it feels, it's never been more dangerous to be a journalist, right? In that time period, from January 2018, which is when the government first tried to shut us down, it filed at least 11 cases and investigations in about 14 months, so a case a month. And then in a 3-month period, I had to post bail 8 times so I could be free. And then the last, when you saw me, that was the second time, right after the Google, when I was arrested, it was the second time I was arrested in 5 weeks. I now have lots of experiences I wish I didn't have. Where are we? I think in a better place than where we were at that point. Always when you walk into something new, it's quite uncertain, you don't know. And like online and in the real world, the fear is oftentimes worse than the reality. At least that's what I keep telling myself. I think that time I was grappling with certain realities that I could go to jail, and I didn't know how much until after I was arrested twice, right? It actually took Amal Clooney, because Rappler's small, we're about 100 people. I don't have a chief legal counsel, which meant I was the one looking at these 11 cases handled by different people, and I didn't know how long I could go to jail for. And Amal was the one who said, Maria, you could go to jail for 63 years. And then of course I said, so how are you gonna keep me out of jail, Amal? We're in a better place, right? Number one, because the best defense is a good offense. I had to learn you have to fight for your rights, and journalists are not so good at this. We can fight for everyone else, but it's hard for us to stand up for ourselves. I realized, I was very quiet when all the investigations were going on, but when I was arrested, I was unshackled. And I realized power abused, power is being abused, that my rights were violated, and I felt so much better, strangely enough. There's nothing harder than being handcuffed, which is what most of us are like on social media, while you're watching people who know less than you or who are manipulating. You're watching them kind of do this with impunity. So better. Also, you have me here. We have a lot more allies. Thank you. And we've survived, and we've survived well. We were forced to pivot our business model. We're doing better this year than we were last year.
That is so great to hear, and it's great that you can be here with us.
I'm glad to be here.
I think we all agree. So let's talk a little bit. May I ask the tech team to give us the time here on the screens? Because we don't see it. That would be great, just so that we leave plenty of time for you guys' questions. Let's talk a little bit. So one thing that I find incredibly interesting is that you could make the case for Rappler, and you could make the case for press freedom in the Philippines easily and just focus on that. One thing that I find completely impressive about how you approach these topics is you always advocate for people to kind of see the bigger picture of press freedom all over the world, and you never just limit the conversation to the Philippines. Let's talk a little bit, share some thoughts about why you think this is not just a Filipino, small problem, why it has kind of tendencies that you can see in more countries all over the world.
These tactics that were tested and tried in the Philippines are coming soon to a democracy near you. And you in the United States were the target. We were only the petri dish. This is exactly what Cambridge Analytica whistleblower Christopher Wiley told me about 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago. He said that they went to countries like the Philippines. Why? Because 100% of Filipinos on the internet are on Facebook. Facebook is our internet. Free Basics so every cell phone has Facebook. You don't need data, you don't need to pay for data to get it. We also have, 4 years running, the population that spends the most time on social media. So Chris said that, you know, Maria, the Philippines, we've been there before when we were still SCL, and we've been there a while. This also is validated by a lot of other digital folks, right? Yahoo, for example, other groups, American groups, Western groups that are trying to test out digital, they test it in the Philippines because we're 100 million people, we speak English, and we're digital. We were the texting capital of the world before social media, and then, like I said, we spend at least 10 hours a day on the internet, and we spend the most time globally on social media. Look, what we saw, Rappler was built on the internet. Internet only, digital only, social media driven. We helped evangelize Twitter, Facebook. We only existed, our video was only on YouTube. That was in 2012. And from 2012 to 2016, we lived in this space and we used it. Social media for social good, we espoused that. We ran a social good summit every year along with the UN General Assembly, right? But in 2016, it pivoted, and we were among the first to see this horrendous manipulation of people happening in plain sight. This is an existential moment, not just for journalism, but for democracy. And you can see this. It is in your country, it is in my country. Every study starting in 2017, freedomhouse.org said, in 2017, at least 28 countries around the world were being rolled back by cheap armies on social media. A year later, Oxford University's Computational Propaganda Research Project pushed that number to 48. Where are we today? We need to do something. If the world continues as it is today, your kids will not be growing up in a democracy and will go into a dark period of time. If anything, the lesson learned here is why we all went into journalism in the first place. Information is power.
Give us a bit more, and I think these are such powerful words. How did you, when you conceived Rappler and when you started with the small team and now you're up to 100 journalists and becoming a profitable business, and you were a profitable business already a few years ago before the crackdown of the government happened again. Give us a little bit of kind of an insight into how you reacted to these tactics, because it is pretty inconceivable for, I think, many of us, even though we all live in countries where there is some, negativity happening and some negative influence on press freedom. It is pretty inconceivable to live in a country where the crackdown goes as far as arrests, goes as far as, the way that Duterte has tried to influence you. What were your tactics to react to that? How did the journalism you do react to that?
Data. We looked at data. But I also want to share with you that let's look at the tactics. And many of you have heard me say this, so I'll be very quick about it, right? Fear and violence in the real world. That fear and violence is a brutal drug war. The UN says at least 27,000 people killed since July of 2016 in this drug war. That fear then translates to the online violence and fear, the patriotic trolling, right? This is what social media tech platforms have enabled. And fear and violence then is meant to pound you to silence. And how do you deal with that? You don't be silent. But it requires not knowing what the reality really is, right? So I've heard some of the panels in the last week, both from the NLA and here, talking about trust, right? You cannot talk about trust if you do not talk about the information operations that is magnifying and pounding the fracture lines of our societies. The Mueller report documents this, but you have, the Black Lives Matter, for example, trolls on both sides, Russian disinformation networks that will push in lies laced with anger to incite anger and hate, and incite, I mean, in one instance, send people out to protests, different protests. Look at that. Information operations that sent Americans out protesting on opposite sides of a divisive issue. This is what's happening globally, and I think that, you know, what we're seeing now is if social media platforms, if civic society, if governments don't do anything about this, we will see more manipulation of the public sphere. It goes down to this. If no one knows what the facts are, because the lies spread faster than the facts, right? That's the way the algorithms are set up. If no one knows what the facts are, then you cannot have truth or debate, and you can't have trust. If you have no facts, no truth, no trust, you have no democracy. So this is existential. Sorry, I keep going around that word because it is. It is, right? So, you know, our problems, how do we fight this? We have to expose it. A lot more of us have to be doing stories about this completely, it's so extremely manipulative, and it works under the surface. And if you don't do stories about it, your public won't know about it. We've written a lot more about the loss of trust in media, and a lot of people pound that, including the disinformation networks. But what are we doing to show that you are being manipulated to think that? I have the data from the Philippines. I saw the spike, and it is there. It is a push for power and a push for money simultaneously.
Yeah. Rappler does not only write the stories, you also, when you talk about data, you also invest a lot in a data infrastructure. You invest a lot in technology. Tell us a little bit more about why you do that and what you invested in.
So Rappler is very cheap by American standards. I don't mind saying this because it's in all the disclosures, it's in the legal cases. Our burn rate in the past, at our peak, our monthly burn rate for all of 100 people was about $200,000 a month, right? Tech, if you're a journalist and you're not looking at tech, you are missing both our survival and our evolution. I think journalists need to move into this. We need to be able to make the decisions for algorithms because we know how to protect the public sphere. It's a priority, right? Although you can also say news managers were kind of, not bleeding hearts, but you know, people always say if you're a businessman, you're not going to be a good journalist. If you're a good journalist, you're not going to be a good businesswoman. Let me say man or woman, right? I hope Rappler is changing that, but we are certainly doing things that a business person, a pure business person looking at the numbers would not do, and then finding ways to survive after that. I'm sorry I went off. You asked me, what was the question that you wanted was?
Well, we basically exactly like the investment that you do in tech and data, what do you use it for? And you use it to build your business. But also, I think it's really interesting, maybe you can share a little bit about that, the way you work with data at Rappler.
Yeah. So the very things, look, part of the reason is because since 9/11, and 9/11 just happened, here's a realization I just had like 2 days ago. When 9/11 happened, I watched it I was on a treadmill in Jakarta, so it was nighttime in Jakarta, and I watched the plane crash into the first tower, and to me it was a memory, because in 1995, there was a man who was arrested in the Philippines, probably the very first pilot that was recruited by the group that would later be known as Al-Qaeda. He was arrested by police, and I had a 1995 interrogation report that talked about a plot, and this is a direct quote, a plot to hijack planes and crash them into buildings. Some of the buildings that they named were the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. So 1995, the guy who hired that man, and he's now in Colorado in Supermax prison, his name is Abdul Hakim Murad. The man who hired him is the 9/11 mastermind, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. His nephew, Ramzi Youssef, trained the Abu Sayyaf, right, in bomb making. Anyway, sorry. Since 9/11, I focused on looking at link analysis of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and Ramzi Youssef from the Philippines. The FBI and the police would call it link analysis. Then it became network analysis, which led right into social media, right? What is social media? It's network analysis, really. It's a network effect. So in 1995, the terrorists used the Philippines as a testing ground. The shoe bomber out of London, that was tested from security, how to get it through security in the Philippines in 1994. The liquid bomb, also 1994, tested in the Philippines. This was the last part of my career when I was with CNN. I focused on how terrorism spreads. Now, here you go, your new terrorism is information operations. And again, the Philippines is the testing ground. This is my rage, you know. And Christopher Wiley said, why? Why the Philippines? And I know this from the terrorists and from hearing from Chris Wiley. It is because law enforcement is weak, you get away with impunity, and you have a population that can be easily manipulated, right? It works in the Philippines, it works in America. I mean, look, Filipinos actually liked your president Filipinos liked Barack Obama better than Americans liked him, according to the Pew Global Attitude Survey, where the US's only colony. So, I move, you have to pull me in, but...
No, I'm not gonna do that.
Anger.
That's what I want.
Anger management is what I'm dealing with.
That's perfect. We are very happy to be part of the Maria Ressa anger management program here because we learn so much from it.
No, but you know, I'm going to quote Chris Wiley again, and if you haven't seen the story on Rappler, we published it 2 or 3 days ago. He said, colonialism hasn't gone, it's moved online. And here's the last appeal, or maybe the first of many appeals I will make to you. You are powerful in a way we're not. The only reason you're speaking to me is because I speak English well and I can translate what's happening to us for you. But if you don't move, nothing moves in my country. Nothing. It took the congressional hearings with Mark Zuckerberg for anything to change. And I've been talking about this for 3 years. We've been living under this for 3 years. So, please do the stories, push your American social media platforms. And the reason why we're partners with all of them is because they are both the bringers of the problem, but they're also the solution right now. Because governments, the best hearing I've testified in is in Ottawa, that's led by the Canadians, and the chair is Britain, Damian Collins, right? 14 members of parliament from 14 nations, the members of parliament were there. And it was the most sophisticated. But even at that point, it's very hard to do a one-size-fits-all for all of our countries around the world. And as long as there's no controls, as long as the platforms don't change the way they behave, the people who will suffer the most are countries like ours in the global south. We don't even have a seat at the table. I do now, thanks to you, and maybe to President Duterte. But please do something about it, please.
So let's shift gears a little, and let's talk a little bit about, so one thing that I've found so interesting in following the story of Rappler is that from the very early start kind of times on, you envisioned that as a profitable and growing business. And you and your team invested a lot of time and energy and effort in defining how that business model is going to work and how it's going to scale. First question, tell us a little bit more about the business model. Second question, you would have had, and especially now, you would have a very easy time just, I think you would easily get philanthropy money and just be able to run this operation. Why are you not doing that? Why are you still focusing so much on being a profitable business?
the same way that when bad things happen, we follow the money. If you cannot be self-sufficient, you cannot be independent. And while I'm very thankful, there's like our legal fees zoomed, and a legal defense fund started by the Committee to Protect Journalists and the Press Freedom Defense Fund here in the US helped us and continues to help us with that. I feel like if you only follow philanthropy money, someone else will dictate your agenda. Although some of them are really good, right? Having said that, it isn't an option for us because here's our, I'm a really stubborn person. My bosses will tell you how stubborn I am. You know, I ran the largest news group in the Philippines, and the owner, he was a tycoon. He always said, Maria, you're not practical enough, you know. You have to, like, I'll give you an example. One of our reporters found a cockroach in her, Chowking is like a fast food restaurant in the Philippines, and it was late night, and she found a cockroach in it. So she was on the overnight, she did the story. When she did the story, of course I get a call from the president, because it was for the morning show, and our president was angry because our advertiser was angry. And for me, it was like, well, this is our reporter who almost ate a cockroach. What do you do, right? In the States, well, again, everything is changing, but we stood our ground, we ran the story, we lost the advertiser, that advertiser, and of course my president got very upset with me and said, I don't pay enough attention to shareholder values. It's always a push and pull. And for me, it is the battle of journalists, and hopefully tech people soon that we protect the public sphere against public and private power, right? That's the goal of journalism. The mission has always been the same. Anyway, so how do you bring it to where we are today?
What is the business model? How did it evolve over time?
So first, the beginning of it was, because I headed the largest news group, we came out with founding advertiser packages. Digital stuff is pennies, you know this, pennies compared to television, right? You don't translate, and your newspaper revenues also get pennies to the dollar. So what we did is, we tried to bring our brand to digital, because everyone who controlled digital actually atomized the meaning of the brands we built, right? And we walked into their system where meaning is atomized into these pennies, and I thought, why will I play in that system? So I did no programmatic revenues at the beginning, and we sold founding advertiser packages when we had zero, because we started from zero. We grew really fast, and then we moved into native advertising in 2012, 2013. From native advertising, maybe we didn't really do programmatic until 2016. So 4 years after we had already, our base is roughly 10 million uniques. We could hit anywhere from 30 to 90,000 page views a month. So after that, though, I realized that the people who were making the most were tech companies who wanted to scale. So in 2014, we built this platform. It was mapping the conversation on Twitter, on Facebook, right? Because you can map it. If I say something and you pick it up and you retweet it, we can look at this. Academics do this work. We built that platform, and then we rolled it out, and the people who, the companies, and they tend to be the bigger multinational companies who were our clients, didn't want a dashboard. They wanted to be told what to do. So this tech thing, not so good, but we pivoted it when we came under attack in 2016. I'll finish this because it's such a long story. The business part is really fascinating. But what did we do when we came under attack?
Yeah.
Sorry, the last chunk was the disinformation networks. When we came under attack online in July of 2016, we started a campaign called No Place for Hate on Facebook. And I was so naive because I thought it was just misinformation. I didn't realize the scale and scope of the problem, but then we started scraping the data in August, and by the end of August, we had evidence that 26 fake accounts can influence up to 3 million others. And we began doing a database we called the Shark Tank. This database is more than 1 terabyte in size now, and this tracks the terrorists in the information ecosystem of the Philippines. When the government tried to shut us down in January 2018, within 3 months, we lost almost 50% of our advertising revenue. And so what we did is we went into an emergency huddle. How do we survive this? And we looked at everything we were doing for Rappler, and then I said, and social media as unstructured big data, and understand how their brand and their communities are being manipulated so they can fight back. That revenue stream grew 2,000% from April last year to this year. And then what we did, we tweaked all the tech so that our programmatics grew. I want to show you,
Yeah,
is it
show
okay?
the one slide, that would be
I want to show
great.
you one slide which shows you kind of the kind of what I think every news group now has to do. The red is our advertising, and this is every year, right? So from 2012, you can see it was all advertising driven. You can't see it. So 2012 is this one, all the way out here. You can see it's all advertising driven. The red is advertising. And then the green is the B2B model that we did. And then if you look up on top, we also do like a split grant. Our grant is this little blue thing. Here, the purple. And then the green, that's the one I told you about. And then programmatic. You can see programmatic kind of passively growing until 2017 and 2018. And then we're kicking it up even more. The thing that I like that I showed our shareholders is that advertising revenues will go down. So if anything, the government only pushed us to drop advertising faster, not to rely on it as much, and then to find another revenue stream, to diversify our revenue stream, right? So you can see this is our 2019 budget. We're right now 69% up versus last year. We're on track to hit our budget, which is 44% up versus last year, where we dropped 3% from 2017. So we were roughly parallel, 2017, 2018. So to me, that's my target. You gotta diversify your revenue stream, because if you don't, we don't know where the world is gonna go, right? That's the reality.
And I said to Maria before when we prepared it and looked at the slides, I said, oh my God, I think if you talk to like 100 European or American media organizations, I don't know how many are going to show that picture. How many organizations are that smart about kind of diversifying their, in venture capital, you'd say fully diversified portfolio to kind of protect you from losses on one side. So I think it's really impressive.
Thank you, but I know a lot of you are doing this as well. So for us, we were kicked to do it.
Yeah,
you know,
sometimes.
Because obviously, if our advertising didn't drop because they were afraid, then I would be relying on advertising a lot more. But I think, look, we live in a very uncertain world, and yet the mission of journalism has never been as important. So we have to find a way to survive, and please don't let your businessmen rule. Because, you know, and then the last part, here you can also lead this. Hit those advertisers. Advertisers, if you're here, right? It's like, put your money where your mouth is. News is not the same as entertainment. And I made this argument all the time in my old network in the Philippines. News is the soul. It is the soul. If you don't have facts, you don't, again, you've heard me say this so many times, right? But I guess this is what I learned in the time with CNN. I spent a lot of time learning the craft and the trade. Those disciplines, the standards and ethics, yes, they're real, but our world has just grown so much more complex, especially for news managers. Create the content, yes, but understand that the content that we're creating has now been commoditized. And we have to find ways of banding together so that we can get the value that is needed in the kind of function we play in society.
I'd love to open it up to questions because I'm sure there are people in the audience with questions. We do have a microphone here in this row, and we do have a microphone there. So if you want to ask a question, could you just get up and go to the mic here or there, whatever is closer to you? I'm sure we're going to have someone. Yes. And it would be great if you could also state which organization you work at and your name.
Hi, my name's Steve Morris. I'm from the UK. I first heard about you on a BBC World Service radio program where you're being interviewed, which was amazing, you know, so I thought you were an extraordinary individual then. You just confirmed it now. You made a statement on that radio program, which I thought was profoundly provocative, and I'm wondering whether you stick with it now, which was, you said that Facebook has destroyed democracy. Do you still stick by that?
Yeah, yeah. And it isn't just Facebook, I would say technology. Look, populism has always been around. Propaganda has always been around, right? Power, the way it's moved in democracy, it's always been around. But what happened with technology is it became the accelerant, and it moved at a pace that both journalists and civil society and governments couldn't deal with. Really, I always say it's like you injected a virus into our body politic. And that virus is taking over, killing our system, killing our bodies. I'm a frenemy with Facebook. You know, we're one of two. Hi, Facebook, if you're here. Is anyone from Facebook here?
No, they wouldn't dare to say it.
Look, they both broke democracy, and I'm also looking at them to save it. They must, and I call it enlightened self-interest, right? Because they are, frankly, the only ones with the power to do this. Now, you know, if at my worst. Anyway, for the guys on, if you're here from Facebook, we are one of two Filipino fact-checking partners of Facebook, and I am still on Facebook, although, you know, since I get attacked so much on Facebook, I'm on Twitter a lot more. I haven't given up. I'm not going to be silenced. That's number one. And then number two, move fast, break things. That's Facebook, right? While they may still be in denial, I think that you're seeing that denial really go backwards. I don't think we need to like pound them into oblivion because frankly, again, they're the only ones with the power to fix it right now. And you know, at my worst, most manipulative, I will say, I could go to jail if you don't fix this, you know? Because how does it work? It's astroturfing bottom up on social media. That's the attacks against us. And then a year later, President Duterte takes those same attacks and goes top down. You've seen this happen in the United States. You've seen this happen in Britain. President Duterte was elected 1 month before Brexit. And in August of 2016, I went to 3 Facebook guys who I gave them the data. And I said, this is so alarming. You must do something about it. And I thought, because Facebook is very fast. They're really smart. And look, when they couldn't figure out that they needed to pivot to mobile, they did it in 2 years' time. So I kind of like went to all my friends and said, please, please, 2 years, fix this problem. I think this one's a tougher problem to fix for them because they're schizophrenic, the business model. And this isn't just Facebook. You know, the tech business model grabbing our attention manipulates people. And it manipulates not just the facts, but election integrity, perhaps, and consumer behavior, right? These are all things that that we've enabled that tech to do. Anyway, I'm talking too much. So do I still believe it? Yes, but I also believe that they must find a way to fix it.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi there. Thank you so much for being here, first of all, with us in New Orleans, and thank you for moderating such a great conversation. My name's Natasha Zubes. I'm a news anchor with ABC News in San Francisco, and also a John S. Knight Fellow at Stanford for this year. So, 2 questions. The first one, if you could take over at Facebook, what are the tangible changes you would make to make it more
good
conducive to a democracy?
So I don't think it's just a Facebook problem, even though in the Philippines that's front and center, right? But one of the things that we've been trying to do behind the scenes, and I think now it's in front of the scenes, because governments have already signed up to do this, because you need governments. But yet you have some governments like mine who are using the technology in a scorched earth policy kind of way, right? They don't care about the future. But you need governments, you need media, you need education, you need universities, you need civil society. So one of the things that we were thinking of, and this is, I'm one of 25 people in the Information and Democracy Commission, among other things. There's something else called Designing for Democracy. That's IRI, and NDI here in the United States, Data for Democracy. We need to take, for me, it is first about making sure that information operations do not continue with impunity, right? So as I try to hold my government to account for the impunity in the drug war, these social media, these tech platforms need to be held to account for the impunity they are allowing. If we as news people are liable for things we get wrong, well, whether they want to take the responsibility or not, are gatekeepers. They're gatekeepers to consumer behavior, they're gatekeepers to facts, they're gatekeepers to everything right now. And AI will allow them to know us better than we know ourselves. So the first is stop the impunity. Take the data that we already have. There must be some kind of global landscape, global body, and kind of like a global Interpol. And the reason I say this is you go back to post-Holocaust, post-World War II, when the world tried to stop humanity from killing humanity. Remember? What did they do? What did nations and civil society do? They created Bretton Woods, they created NATO, they created the UN, the human rights, right? So that's what we need right now, because in many ways what has happened is that old power, governance and global systems of maintaining checks and balances looked away while new power disrupted governance and democracies. And what new power didn't understand these very complex checks and balances of global geopolitical power. And yet old power had no understanding of how they were being eaten away by new power. So we need to put these things together and stop the impunity. That's the first step. Because if you're on social media, you feel it, you know it. People aren't as nasty as we are right now on social media. It's fed. And part of that is the studies also show you, and our mood meter has shown us from the beginning, that anger spreads fastest. Anger lies laced with anger and hate spread faster than really boring facts. That's the other reason why news groups need to really share each other, because these disinformation networks are collaborating very closely together, and that's the reason why Facebook is having a hard time, because is it authentic or inauthentic? Anyway, sorry, again, I move off to an aside because there's so many different ways we can go, but if I were to do it, so the first, make the data transparent of who exactly is manipulating whom. I look to the United States to do something about the Mueller report, because good God, guys, if you don't, you're saying it's okay. This is the new, look, disinformation is part of the military doctrine of the Russian government, just saying. And then in our part of the world, we monitor our disinformation systems, and we're seeing China walking in as well. So if I think of like Russian disinformation systems as B2C, Chinese are B2B for now, but walking into the B2C. Does that make sense? Okay, so what else? Oh, please give me Facebook.
I think that would be great.
No, I would say, you know you're gonna lose money. be more transparent, and say, this is what we're going to do to protect the public sphere. Because frankly, if they don't do it, our democracies will crumble.
Okay, so I have a follow-up question to that question, and then I have a personal question for you
Sure.
as well.
Brief. We have some more here then.
Okay, I'll go fast. So with the insights that you have coming out of the Philippines, what concerns you the most, or what are you sort of monitoring with our situation in the U.S., with our current president, and with the misinformation that we're dealing with here? Big question.
Well, the biggest one is, of course, in the old world, which is the easier for all of us as journalists my age. In the old world, the United States was the beacon of democracy. You fought for human rights. Your leader normally stands up for people who get arrested like me. I can't say that the US really didn't, but Canada and Britain were up front much more. There is a vacuum because no one in the world knows what values America stands for right now. That's really tough. And the biggest example I can show you is that there's a dictator's playbook. They're learning from each other. And when President Trump called Jim Acosta, CNN, and the New York Times fake news, a week later, President Duterte called Rappler fake news. There's that saying, the phrase the word I won't say, flows downhill. We're downhill, And then the other part, of course, is your government also learns from ours. We were banned from the palace in February of 2018. My reporter and me, and not that I've even gone to the palace, but randomly we were banned, and then a few months later, Jim Acosta was banned, but you all came together. Part of the reason in January 2019, the journalists dropped the ball at Times Square was a show of strength and collaboration. Please fight now while you're still strong, because over time, we all get weaker in this kind of environment.
Okay. Last question. There are those of us who are called to, stand up for what's right and do incredible things, and obviously I think we all can agree in this room you're one of those people. How do you deal with that on a personal level, being such a lightning rod for so many years? You are, after all, still only a person. How do you deal with being attacked every day? How do you deal with death threats? Have you ever feared for your life? And what is your philosophy about all of that?
Wow, that's huge. So first, the way I think about it is that, the baton was just passed to me at a tough time. I follow a lot of Filipino journalists who fought for democracy under martial law and then pushed forward. And, now I got the baton and I was like, oh, does it have to be now? And I wish I could pass it to someone else. And, my friends and my family all say, of course I could stay in the States. I'm a dual citizen. But at the same time, so much of what we do is important right now. Our young reporters, they actually are so inspirational, because at the beginning when the attacks happened, they were so idealistic. They went into the fray, and then they come back and they say, now I know what being a journalist feels like. But when you go through this for 3 years, when the president decided that our reporters couldn't be anywhere where he was, including campaign rallies, our young reporters had to actually disguise themselves to be able to be in the same room. That's ironic, right? Anyway, we challenged this at the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is taking this, but let's see where it goes. How does it feel? I think this is one of those times when, for my generation of journalists, everything we say we are and everything we believe in, the standards and ethics that we've created and upheld, this is the time that matters. We need to push back, push forward. Because if we don't, then we were journalists in the first place. And then the second thing I would say is, this is a coping mechanism from when I was still a kid, and my family moved to New Jersey from Manila. I could barely speak English at that point. Whatever it is that you're most afraid of, picture it in your head and really think about it and kind of accept it. So whatever it is, you touch it, you hold it, and embrace that. If you embrace that, then whatever you're afraid of, you rob it of its ability to stop you from acting. I was saying the other night when we had dinner that the jail part took me a month to get over. But, you know, a lot of things matter right now. The world your kids will live in, the world we live in, will depend on our actions.
Thank you.
Thank you. We had the last question. Yes. Yeah.
I wanted to ask about, I feel like in a lot of ways you're ahead and kind of sharing your insights back for us to take the torch. And I'm curious about what you've learned. I think it happens on so many levels where you try to get the information across, you try to fight for the truth. How do you handle when you're discredited? And how do you win discussions or try to get a discussion that's productive when it turns to emotions versus facts? When facts no longer stand because people are acting on emotions, how do you move the conversation forward?
That's a fantastic question. And that is why I go to data. And you know what? Data's really boring, right? So we have to tell the stories. And we're good at telling stories. But this is the way our minds have always worked. Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize winner, wrote this book, Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. Journalists are thinking slow people because we process, we cull, we determine the facts, right? Social media is thinking fast. And when you put these together, journalists and news will inevitably always lose. So I accept that. And we continue going forward. And that's why, look, I look at Facebook, Twitter, Google, they're partners. Because I do know I work with really good people inside those platforms who understand and who are trying to work to make it better. I just need them to go faster. But you know, in the end, here's the other part. Here's what we're trying to do. We're actually building a new tech platform, right? Because a lot of the ideas that we put on websites are really old. They're old, down to like content hierarchies, all of the things that we do as traditional news, traditional journalists. The tech has evolved so much, and it evolves every 3 months. You know, so anyway, this platform we roll out by the end of the year. Our end goal is not to just keep time on site, to keep you on the site, but to actually move you to act for impact in the real world. And by doing that, I've embraced something that was always controversial in my old world, if you're my generation, which is, in the end, I had a civic engagement arm built into Rappler from the beginning. We build communities of action, and journalism is the food we feed our communities of action. Because I live in a country that always had endemic corruption and weak governance, weak law enforcement, and I wanted to use the technology to help build institutions bottom up. I think we can do that. And this is also why the tech giants, you know, you don't want to keep this world, the world that you've created, as it is right now. I think journalists can help in that process.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I worked at CNN on the international desk for a while, and I'm so proud to see you here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. We are nearly, sadly, and I think we all would have loved to keep that going for another hour or two or end this, but we are nearly at the end of our time. I want to ask the very specific question: what can we as journalists, as students, as managers, as educators, what can we do to help you?
Okay, so first, please make sure I go back to that because I want you to help me. but I want to read you kind of a series of tweets I sent out this morning because this connects to everything that I've said. But it's said by Jim Balsillie. Do you know him? He's one of the co-founders of BlackBerry, right? So he said this: the online advertisement-driven business model subverts choice and represents a foundational threat to markets, election integrity, and democracy itself. So paraphrase that. To agonize over social media's role in proliferation of online hate, conspiracy theories, politically motivated misinformation, and harassment is to miss the root and scale of the problem. Social media's toxicity is not a bug, it's a feature. Technology works exactly as designed. Technology products, services, and networks are not built in a vacuum. So, what can you do to help me? It will help yourself. It's also enlightened self-interests.
Even better.
So I think first, please let's tell our public how we're being manipulated. No one wants to do that. And in a way, by just focusing on the loss of trust, which is what all the data says, we're also not looking at why the trust was lost. Yes, some of it is our fault because we went after clickbait on social, but most of the news groups I still follow still maintain the standards and ethics of why we all became journalists in the first place. So please fight back. Two, you're an activist right now. Embrace it. You know, you're fighting for democracy. You must embrace it. Although that's always, again, in the old world, we have this debate in Rappler all the time. How far do you go? Where do you go? Are you gonna do the false equivalence of the climate change argument, right? And then finally, and here's where you can help us. If you go Rappler, and then we have a membership called Rappler Plus or crowdfunding. That's actually helped us significantly, even though Filipinos are scared, and they are scared. The fear is real. The only thing that worries me is that if we don't hold the line and hold power to account and help encourage more courage, that this is what the next 3 decades will look like. When I worked for CNN, I covered every country from Southeast Asia moving from authoritarian one-man rule to democracy. I love that CNN gave me that front row seat on history, and this pendulum swung. And now I'm at the tail end of my career. Oh man, it hurts to see the pendulum swinging back. So, your democracy will help determine where my democracy goes. Please do something about it.
Maria, you're such an inspiration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.